Good job. This would be Thursday, May 21st, advanced class as we get to talk about the end of Princess Bride and what goes into all the information from there. Charter challenge after school and test coming up tomorrow, and then all kinds of fun information today. Hopefully not a whole lot of yelling, but we'll see. You guys have this picture, so you guys are good to go with that one. We did the picture of Peter Gore, because that was the lawyer, Kermit Shaw. And then we talked about the albino, because that popped up in the story, and he does an part there too. And then we talked about this one. I had no one in this class send me information. I had 3 kids in first period who were able to track down the information.
Where?
I could not find it. I looked for an hour.
We can't look together.
Then we'll go from there. All right.
Kayla,
Sammy.
So I had a question about Wesley.
Yes.
So I know he took the pill that brought him back to life.
Yes.
But then after they escaped, did he die again, or did
That's
he stay
where they
alive?
kind of leave it up. If you go and read the sequel, Buttercup's Baby, he's alive. And I think, in theory, what's supposed to happen is that with the pill that Miracle Max gives him, that he's supposed to die, you're only supposed to come back to life for a little bit of time, like a zombie, and you get to go around. But why is it that Wesley comes back to life? And I think the idea being that true love is so powerful that it manages to go beyond what it's supposed to allow him to do. So because of that, even though he's supposed to die again, love so strong, like Annabelle Lee, that true love, it just allows, amazing kids who just like to yell at me. Tendai? No.
It says that he relapsed. So
He does.
He just relapsed.
And I think he slowly slinks back into death, and I think it's like a sickness, but eventually he can beat it. At least, going off of Buttercup's Baby, if you read that first chapter, he's alive and running around. So I'm assuming that that's a sign, at least they refer to him that way. At least long enough for him to have a baby. So I'm assuming that took some time, at least 9 months. So, physiology. Jackson? Good stuff. Very mature of you. Questions that you guys have before I get into my babbly stuff, because once I get into my babbly stuff, we might get past your questions as far as the end stuff goes. Shoemake?
In your map, why isn't there like a lake?
It's not his map.
Oh, what?
He didn't.
This map?
Yeah, that map in the book is different than the one you had.
This one, they have, unlike this one, which is like an actual map of the world, this is more like a creative map. They have gone back and some artist has drawn a creative interpretation, so it's not exactly to scale. So I can't do that. It's just
because but didn't in the book that there wasn't they didn't travel waters.
they didn't travel. I mean, like with the sharks in the boat
It's just a little map.
on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally didn't do that at all. Yeah, good stuff though.
He's a pirate.
Tendai.
I thought the Zoo of Death was in the corner of the castle.
Yeah, it is.
Cause no, it's not.
I think it's outside the castle.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, I thought it was underneath.
It's
Well,
a skull.
It's underground. Once again, it's a creative interpretation. Heard it as? Give me a show.
Oh, Mr. Brovicast, I remember now.
Good job, child.
Yeah.
What do you remember?
It was when Inigo and Fezzican died.
Yes, dear?
When you tried to fix my book, you broke it.
Wait,
Yeah, it
can we see your
happens.
shirt?
All it has to do is get you through tomorrow.
Can I see your shirt?
Handon?
Oh. Wait, at the end, I was really confused. Did the prince die or?
You stand up.
No. So at the very end, when it's the Brute Squad from Fezzik.
That shirt's my favorite.
The prince does not die. He just gets into the imaginary duel with Wesley, and then Wesley just basically threatens him, and they basically just leave him tied up, and then they take off. He's like, I could kill you, but I won't. I'm going to battle you to the pain. And that's what he talks about, doing the horrible things to him so that small children cry when they see him and stuff like that. But he doesn't actually go through and kill him because Wesley's supposed to be a good person, and if you're a good person, you don't just slaughter people for the fun of it. Apparently that's wrong or something. I don't know. Morals I've heard about. Alright. Then if you have no other questions, I'll get to my information, and then we'll come back and see if that sparks yours. I have 3 things or 3 bits of information I want to try and get to. So I'll do one little bit of information, it's too tight. We'll talk about it, another bit, and then we'll go through it from there. The first bit, as far as the original Morgenstern, with you guys trying to find the book, I know a lot of you guys searched for it last night and weren't able to find much. And part of the reason is because with the original Morgenstern, our book, The Princess Bride, is fictional. the whole way through. The whole book. Wait, you guys know what fictional means?
Yeah.
What's
Free.
fictional?
Not real.
Fake.
Good. The fact that the whole book is fake, is not real, is made up stuff. Which means, of course, if the whole book is made up, it's made up to the point that there is no Florin or Gilder. Those are both completely imaginary, made-up countries that have never existed at any time.
Wait, what's that map that looks
I'm still talking. With the fact that there's no Florin or Gilder, that would, of course, be, with it being completely fictional, that there is no S. Morgenstern.
I told you.
I'm still talking. You have to trust me. There's more coming. Which will get to the fact that if there is no S. Morgenstern, how is it that there's a novel by S. Morgenstern that you can go out and buy? We'll get to that in just a moment, too. The full version of Princess Bride that he mentions throughout the whole book, the ones that he cut the parts out of that he abridges, does not exist. There is no full version of Princess Bride. What you have in your hands is the full version of Princess Bride. The only version of Princess Bride that exists is the one that's right there in front of you. Pretty much the whole thing was just a story idea that he came up with. The idea being that you would have this book that you abridged that was based off of another person's longer version of a book that you then cut down. And so when he wrote this back in 1973, it was before the invention of this thing called the internet. So when he was able to put this information out there, if you wanted to double check the facts, you had to go out to a library and go look it up in books. Turns out most people, and by most people I mean everyone in America, is lazy. And they just never bothered to double check the information and realized that Florin and Gilder have never existed, and the fact that these countries are not out there. But when he wrote the book, people completely bought into it and completely thought that this was a real thing. So he decided, like any good author, to roll with it and just sort of see what happens. When he came up with the idea of writing in for the reunion scene, which, by the way, there is no reunion scene, that's completely fake and made up, he figured people will figure it out and no one's going to believe this whole thing, it's just a little made-up thing I did. That's not what happened. Everyone thought there was a real reunion scene and that S. Morgenstern was real, and so they started writing in a whole bunch, which kind of blew him away. So he decided to send out something to help people figure out that obviously this is fake. Part of that was the name of the lawyer. Do you remember the name of the lawyer? That's his lawyer, which is good. But the name of the lawyer for the S. Morgenstern estate that was from Florin. Kermit Shaw was the name of the lawyer. Kermit the Frog. Kermit Shaw. So when this came out in 1973, the Muppets were very popular, so he decided, hey, I'll throw people a bone, be like, hey, here's the name of the lawyer, obviously a fake name, named after a famous frog that you see on TV. That's not what happened. Everyone just assumed Kermit was a Florinese name, and obviously the Muppet was named from this Florinese background. And he just went, yeah, okay, and just went with it. Yesterday, when I'm reading the reunion scene to you, and I say Kermit the Shog, and you guys just went, yup, that seems natural to me too. And I was like, okay, and we just kept rolling. And that's what happened. And he was like, oh, really? You're just all gonna believe that one? Okay. So then finally we got to 1978, and people kept sending in saying, hey, it's 1978, where's my reunion scene? He was like, oh, you guys really are idiots. So he's like, all right, well then obviously it was just a mix-up with the whole idea of the copyright. It'll get fixed in 1987. He figures, hey, that's like another 9 years from now. By then people forget about the book. Didn't happen. Book became even more popular. More people started writing in about it. So that's when he came up with the third letter. That was in 1987 that said, obviously because of trade relations with NASA and a made-up chemical that does not exist called cadmium, which was named after from England, and you have those eggs you get at Easter time? Yeah. And so it's the same idea where he just sort of like takes a random thing and throws it in there and just makes up stuff. People are like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. And he just kept making up stuff and people just kept going with it. I really liked that idea, so that's sort of why we use it, because it creates this whole world that you can buy into. Yeah.
So when you first read the book, did you buy it?
Yeah.
You did?
I mean, until you start figuring it out, yeah, I bought into him. He sells it really well. And that's how you do any good lie. Like a moment ago, when you guys started questioning me then. That's the same way that I was able to lie to you guys. As soon as you guys questioned, Mr. Brovicast, I don't think the S. Morgenstern person is real. Well, obviously, if he's not real, then how would I have this book? So that's what he did. When people started questioning it, he decided, let's go ahead and commit all the way to this whole thing and see how far we can trick people. So he wrote a book using the name S. Morgenstern, did not put his name in the book at all, and published it and put it out there. So you can buy a book by S. Morgenstern that references The Princess Bride. And so he put that out there to sort of go even further into it. Plus, I'm really good at lying to you guys without actually lying to you. Because when you ask me, Mr. Brovicast, I don't think S. Morgenstern is real, I don't say yes or no. I just go, well, if he's not real, how can I have this book written by him? See, I didn't lie. I just asked you a question. Mr. Brovicast, that's mean and tricky. Oh yeah, there's a lot more coming. We're just at the tip of the iceberg right now. This is just the beginning of the fun stuff we have coming. So there's the beginning. Jackson.
Wait, I know she already kind of asked you, when did you actually figure out there was no S person?
The S. Morgenstern, after I read it and Mr. Sturgeon read it, and we both started talking and sort of figured it out from there.
How did you even start?
I read it after the internet was invented, so you just start looking stuff up.
Oh.
If you do research on the internet, it solves a lot of stuff. Yes.
Wait, so this is his story?
Yeah.
He just made it up?
Yeah. He thought it'd be a cool idea to come up with a book where he wrote it where he pretends that he's cutting a longer book shorter. So that way he could just like keep cutting out parts and being like, oh, this would be a boring part. But there was no original part. He just kept making up those parts he cut out.
Well, then what about the thing at the beginning with his son in the book and stuff? What? That doesn't make any sense.
We'll talk about that in a minute. So hang on. We'll come back to that. Constano?
So when you said that three people in first period found it, how did they find
Yeah.
They didn't. They did the research and they sent me in and they found little references to the fact that S. Morgenstern was not real.
Oh.
And so that's what they sent me. Since obviously they couldn't find the actual book.
Also frustrated that's not
Yeah, learning to do that. Carter!
Are you telling me it took 2 minutes to find what I looked for 3 hours?
Yeah.
What?
Now, if you do some really good looking, and because every once in a while I have kids who think they're smart and they start trying to present information to me early about the idea that maybe William Goldman wrote the whole thing and S. Morgenstern isn't real. Luckily, none of you guys are that smart, so I didn't have to worry about that. It was a nice gift to me. But when I do have kids come forward and do that, that's usually when I bring out the silent gondoliers, and that's usually one of the first things I can do. Like, obviously he's real. You can read it as a biography and stuff out there, and they're like, oh, and that usually gets most kids off. But the second thing is, if you do enough research, you can actually find there's research out there that says William Goldman is actually not a real person. And William Goldman is created by a bunch of college students who created him as part of a social experiment. And so I'll usually point kids to that one. It's not real, but it definitely messes with your head. And then you read that one, and then you have no idea what to believe. And then usually you just start just giving up. I'm like, oh, knowledge just hurts. And at that point, I don't have to worry about it. I'm like, really? Well, what about this one? And you're like, no. And so that's how I just sort of redirect you guys. It makes things more fun. No, he's not a real person. Yes, dear.
Does that mean he made up everything about Stephen King doing the abridgment of Buttercup's Baby?
Yes. So the problem with Buttercup's Baby, when you get to it, is the fact that people kept asking him, because Princess Bride, people really dig the book and dig the humor and stuff like that, because it's a lot of fun. So people kept asking him for a sequel. People who didn't always realize that Princess Bride wasn't real, so that's why he started throwing in this imaginary sequel to the book. He had no intention of writing an entire second book, so what he did was just write the first chapter to a book. So he creates this first chapter to a book that he has no intention of finishing, which as an author is really mean because it ends on a cliffhanger with one of the main characters like falling to their death, and you're like, well, in the next chapter you're going to find out, but there is no next chapter because he just sort of leaves it sitting there. Plus, we go back and you get to find out other fun bits of information where he says that, eighth graders, that he would like to do the second book, Buttercup's Baby, but that he can't do the second book because another author has Florence background to him. And so he works in Stephen King and says Stephen King gets to because Stephen King's family is actually from Florence. And so he gives us all this information about Florence. And so, correct, we call that lying. And so that's where he builds up this whole other background. Speaking of which, and how much fun it is to lie to you guys, because it's not just you, all kids are dumb. This picture, which I've been showing to you almost every day, you realize I just took a random map and put a circle on it, and then just drew arrows, and then just let you guys just fill it in from there.
I didn't realize that.
Now I know, at some point you should have realized, you learn in social studies that there are maps And you could have easily just looked and seen the fact that there is no Florin and Gilder. Mr. Brovicast, but you told us Florin and Gilder don't exist anymore, and that they disappeared after World War II. Right. But then yesterday we talked about the fact about why can't we have the reunion scene? Florin and Gilder are in this big lawsuit right now. So how can we have the Florinese lawsuit? See, trust me, every time I tell that one, I'm like, one of these kids is going to figure it out, and you guys are like, yeah, we're going to do that. That's all so good. And you guys just go right along with it, not realizing, just 3 days ago, you said that the country's gone. How can they be in a, and like every once in a while, I'll have kids who ask that question, and I just have to get really creative and think on my feet and just ask other random questions and distract them, like, is that a squirrel? Like, what? And I just keep going, and it's really easy to distract you guys. That's why I love teaching 7th grade. But it's the same idea. How can you have a country that no longer exists if they're in this dispute? And so it's just a matter of throwing fun things. Yeah, so I love throwing that map up there, just pointing to random things to see if you guys can figure it out. Yeah. All right, so we're ready to go on to the next part of it? I know. We're not done yet. All right. So, when we first got into this, we had to read up the introduction to understand, because as you saw throughout the book, he makes little interjections and stuff like that. If you hadn't read the introduction, you would not have understood why he made these references to his son, why he made these references to his wife. But the problem with all that is, the introduction to the book is part of the book.
Are you kidding me?
That's all made up. That first thing we started reading, that's page 1 of The Princess Bride. That's all made up to go into it. Mr. Brovicast, you talked about the movies he made. Yes. That's how you sell a good lie. You work in little bits of truth into your lie. Because he did work on the Stepford Wives. He did write the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He is famous for those other novels. He did have Hiram Hayden as his editors. These are all real people that he works into it. But he doesn't have a son. He has 2 daughters. That's where he got the idea for the book. When he was telling a bedtime story to his 2 daughters, he said, what should we come up with a story about? One set of princess, one set of bride. And so he went ahead and just combined them together and wrote Princess Bride and sort of combined them together. And that's where the story came from. But the wife that he makes fun of throughout the entire story, I mean, of course, she doesn't exist either. He's married, and still happily married, and not to a child psychologist. She's just a person that's married to him, and they get along quite well. But that whole intro beginning, I'm like, we just have to get through it. I apologize for this introduction. And I tell you, I've tried skipping it in the past, but it gets confusing. I've never skipped it, because if you skipping part of the book, it would be ridiculous. But that's okay, it's just lying to you. And so that's a little introduction that sort of goes into it, because that's just all part of the book. So he creates all of that as just part of the story. The idea of his background, the idea of his father reading it to him. His father never read him this book because the book didn't exist. He just created the whole thing from there. So even that little introductory part is fake. Oh, speaking of more fun fake stuff, those of you who looked at the very front page, if you were to open up the book, and it talks about the 25 years of love for the Princess Bride, and it has little blurbs there, because we talked about his teacher, which, by the way, that teacher doesn't exist either. Don't worry, it's going to get worse. We talked about that, and I had you guys look at the front part, those little blurbs that were there. And you go down, Newsweek, Los Angeles Times, author of Middle Morgenstern. That's made up, obviously. There is no author of Middle Morgenstern. And you go down there, and then you have the name Shog Buongiorno, which is just hello in Italian. But he's just figuring that you guys are illiterate and don't know Italian. But that just means Shog hello. And so it's the same thing going through there. Those were also made up, as you can figure out. He just sort of throws those in, too. Shoemaker. Hey, dear, what's up?
So for like the theory kind of just uses it says S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and adventure.
Yeah.
And you said that when he published it, he already called it a classic. Isn't that also kind of like a hint? Because like you can't like publish it and call it a classic.
I mean, you could. I mean, when I write my books, I could just put on the front of it, classic story, loved by everyone. Nothing's to stop me from doing that. It could be a complete lie. I mean, it's just a way of trying to hype it up. But yeah, when he makes fun of the fact that Morgenstern did that, I mean, it was made up. He was just making fun of the fact that he put that on the front of it.
But when he wrote the original book, did he think that
The original
people
book
would...
isn't real.
Talking about Goldman right now?
When Goldman wrote Princess Bride in 1973.
Yes.
Yes.
When he wrote that, did he think people would like catch on by themselves while reading
I think at some point he had faith in humans figuring it out.
it? Yeah.
I mean, he probably thought that at some level they would enjoy it as a story, he had no idea to what level the dumbness of people will go. And the fact that it was years and decades of people just completely buying into it and thinking it was real. I mean, to the point that, 40 years after it was written, you could teach small children in a classroom and have them buy into it. There's such a level of dumbness. Yeah.
I need to text my mom again.
Okay, that's fine. Alright, so we're ready for the next level then, alright?
Are you kidding? There can't be another level.
Really?
There can't be
What else?
There's a reason I look forward to this day.
Wait, it's the testament of
Wait.
So you can tell us all the lies that
It should be
Um,
like the live
So from
stream.
beginning to end, it's one complete story, which I think is a pretty neat idea, which is all pretty cool. Which of course leads us into talking about other things that we should
No,
probably-
that is.
Tell me that's not real.
There's a reason why I start with Gospel According to Larry.
It's
not
It's not real, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, that's all a complete fictional fake story too.
Oh, well, obviously.
Correct.
Oh my goodness.
Once again, I just had to misdirect you and give little lies also. And so it was the same thing with Gospel. That's my baby step book to go into the idea of creating this world full of lies and getting you guys to buy into it. And I talk about the fact that obviously since it happened from before you were born, then you just have no idea about it. And so once again, just a littlest bit of Googling would have solved that problem for you too, which some of you did. And then you would come to me, and that's when, once again, I just have to redirect you and come up with other things to try and convince you. And when your parents don't remember it, I'm like, people don't remember things. Maybe your parents just didn't do it. And so, once again, I don't flat out lie. I mean, sometimes I do. But on those, it's just a matter of redirecting you with different questions. But the Gospel According to Larry was that same idea of this fake story. And so, Josh does not exist. The sequel, which continues the same idea, continues the same idea as if he did, but of course that's fake, which is why I bring up that one too. If you start to challenge it, I'm like, when you get, and by the way, those conversations were so much fun. You guys kept asking, how is he hiding nowadays? What name does he go by? How can you find him? And that, whew, you guys make me come up with some really interesting answers just on the spot, because I was just, because you guys asked questions other classes hadn't asked, so I had to be creative on that one. And so I was like, well, it's easy to change your name, and so you never know what he's going by now. And you pop back up, and I'd look up the name in the other book, because I treated the other book like it was actual fact, and just fun stuff. Rita.
So, for the author of Gospel...
Janet Teshjian.
Yeah. She never really met a guy who gave... Oh my god.
Yeah, that whole thing was also the same thing, where you just take this idea and sort of go with it. Hannon.
Didn't you say that the sequel was like over there?
Hmm?
What? How?
She just made up more stuff for them.
Yeah, vote for Larry. That's where he runs for president. I mean, he ran for president in 2004.
No, he didn't, but he's not real.
I know, but you see how well I can do that. And that's just part of the joy of teaching, is the fact that if I just say it, because that's what's in the book, then you guys just nod your head.
She just wrote another book that was like,
Yeah, she actually wrote 3 books,
Is it
which
not
follows
just
that
the
same
internet?
thing as if he were real. Yes, dear.
The author's real, though.
Janet Teshjian, yes, she's real. And William Goldman is real, yes. Those two people.
Are they
Wait,
even
are they
alive
married?
anymore?
Yeah, they're both still alive. I mean,
Oh, really?
William Goldman still writes movies, and Janet Teshjian, she hasn't put out much recently, but
They're
she's
probably
still
old now.
Well, most people are old. That's how the world works, but yes. Carter?
So they say not just the internet. Are we not supposed to trust books now? So can we just ignore textbooks?
Yeah, just ignore them. Part of
Failed.
what I do, well, part of why I do this at the end of the year is, well, no, I have no problem with that, is the idea of I want you guys to challenge more than you do. The fact that just because a teacher is in the front of the room and tells you information, that does not guarantee what that person is telling you is fact. There's a lot to be said for double checking information that is given to you. I do it out of the fact that I care for you and I want it to be a fun experience. But there are teachers who will just make up stuff when you start getting into class, because if they don't know what they're doing, don't just assume because you have an adult in the front of the room talking that there's some genius level person and what they're telling you is always going to be the gospel truth. It never hurts to double check the information given to you. So what I do is a fun way of helping you learn. Hopefully, in you being burned by this information, you have learned so that the next time you start to have a little bit of a doubt in the back of your head that maybe the information I'm getting is not as strong as the information it should be, you don't just go, oh, tall person talking, he wouldn't lie, and you just accept it. You go, maybe, just maybe, this person's like Broviac, and there's a reason I should go back and check on it. And so that's part of what I do to help you guys out. What you don't want to do is start thinking about the whole school year and all the information I've been throwing at you all year, because it's just going to start hurting your head if you start trying to just doubt everything. Now, what we do from here is I use this to segue into my stories at the end of the year, because this sort of gives you an idea of how I teach. And so what I realized is years ago with my students is I have a lot of 8th graders that come back and talk to me after school, and a lot of high schoolers that come back to talk to me. And a lot of times I ask them, what is it? The same thing I asked you guys. What can I do to improve my room? And I realized that for a lot of them, it's the fact that they've, at 7th grade, not had a teacher treat them as an adult and talk to them as if they were an adult. So what I try to do for that last week of my stories is I teach you why I'm the person or the way I am. I open myself up and I tell you about the mistakes I've made and the fact that I've screwed up and done horrible things in my life, the fact that I've been arrested multiple times, and the fact that you can do, and from here on out, I tell the truth, from here on through the end of the year. I've done my lying to you. That was to build you up to here. So the fact that I open up and I give you the background about what made me the person I am, the fact that you learn through mistakes, and I've made mistakes in my life. My mistakes made me a stronger person. You all just made a mistake by trusting me through those 2 books, which I know makes it a little tough now to believe the words I say, but moving forward, here's where I get to change the message, if you will, and I get to leave you with a parting gift. So what I try to do is I finish out the year telling you the stories that shaped me and what made me the person I am, and why I do what I do, why I have a Slow Kids section, why it is I make you guys stand, why I do all the things in class. And so I decided to open up my brain, if you will, and let you guys see inside, however scary that might be. And that seems to be when you hear kids talk about my class at the end of the year, it's that. It's the fact that I talk to you as if you are adults, and the fact that I will answer those questions and I move forward and give you that information. My goal is hopefully to start that tomorrow, because I don't think the test will take us the whole class period. 1, it's a longer class period. We don't have best tomorrow. 2, if you've read the book, I don't think it's a super hard test. If you read the book, it's just a fun book. There's something super hard I can put into it. So if you read it and understand it, then you should be fine. We should move through it pretty quickly. And then once you guys have finished that, then hopefully I'll get a chance to get into those first things. And I'll tell you about my arrest. But I guess we get to save that for tomorrow now. Oh, one last thing. The Globetrotters are also reading Princess Bride. They don't know this information yet. Do not tell them this information, because if you do, they tell Mr. Sturgeon, and Mr. Sturgeon tells me, and then you don't get to participate in my stories next week. So do not ruin the story for them, because he likes to torture his kids as much as I like to torture you. So don't bother with that.
That's so
Nice.